This is the What Else Did You Watch podcast with Carlos, Molly, and Aaron. Music by Duke of Julian. Please note this podcast is full of spoilers. Thanks for listening.
We're live.
Okay.
We are live.
How's my sound? Still good?
Girthy.
Poultry.
Girthy.
All right. Welcome to the What Else Did You Watch podcast, where we do the overthinking for you. My name's Aaron.
I'm Molly.
And I'm Carlos.
Today, we're going to be discussing a new movie that Carlos has picked. Carlos, what is the movie that you had picked for us to watch this week?
I have picked Elaine May's Mikey and Nicky from 1976. It's a story about two low-level hoods, the Chicago organized crime, and their failing friendship, and the women left in the path of their final night together.
And why'd you pick this one?
Because this is a movie I recently became aware of, past year and a half-ish, I think. I think I saw Quentin Tarantino talk about it somewhere. And then in general, I try and watch, or at least buy, more and more movies by female directors. Molly, once we were, I think, talking about my collection. You're like, how many directed by women? And it was shockingly few. So I've started doing that, and that was one of these. So I chose this movie because I blind bought it during a Criterion sale, I think last year, because I need more female-directed written movies in my collection at home. And it really just moved me. I think on a thematic level, you guys know I really love The Godfather. I've seen The Godfather more than any other movie, but this is so much different when we're talking about a 70s organized crime movie, right? Like, they don't even seem like they are in the same genre. And I think that's something we can discuss a little bit later on. But it was also, honestly, my first time seeing John Cassavetes and Peter Falk, and they're just cooking. So, yeah, I just loved it. And I thought you guys would have a lot to bring to it. So,
Beautiful.
Yeah, Molly's a big Peter Falk fan, so...
A Peter what fan?
A Peter Falk
with
fan.
the same accent that he has.
A Peter Falk.
Hey. Yeah.
Yeah, so Molly, as a big
What's
Peter
the matter
Falk
with you?
fan, what was this like for you?
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you for the toss. I was wondering who you wanted to go first.
You, absolutely.
Cool. All right. And man, so there's a number of things. This has been on my list for a long time as well, too, for a couple of reasons. I've seen Woman Under the Influence, which was John Cassavetes' kind of primary work, I think, that he gets mentioned for most frequently. And there's a lot there. The performances in there are stellar, which, you know, I think everyone kind of agrees with that, or that's kind of a common take on the whole thing. Peter Falk is, again, just one of my favorite actors. Columbo is just comfort food for myself, as it is still with so many people. He became beloved because of that character. So, and then you add to that Elaine May, who's also been on my radar for a long time. And I know that we're going to probably dive into Elaine May's history in greater depth later, because I think people should know who she is. She is in some ways the godmother of modern improv theater. She was a significant builder. It wasn't one of the founders, but she built, what is it? What was the Chicago group? Named the Compass Players, which
Correct.
later evolved into Second City, which then spawned Saturday Night Live and just kind of the modern era of improv stage work. She's got a fascinating history to her. She is beloved. She's won a Tony. She's been up for multiple screenwriting Oscars, and she has written or ghostwritten some of the most popular movies in Americana. She's done incredible stage work. She's won a Grammy, and almost nobody knows her name. And this is the one thing that I think that we all discovered in this. She was only the third woman to ever be a member of the Directors Guild of America. So this is 1973 when the movie was directed, and only the third effing woman to ever be part of the DGA. And some stories that I've heard, I've spent a lot of time listening to a lot of interviews with her, and she absolutely got no support in terms of her directorial work. The first movie that she was assigned to direct, she had zero experience, and she was really literally learning on the job. She didn't know the terminology. She didn't know that she had to set multiple cameras. And still the movie was made, and it was wildly popular. Later on, when she did Ishtar, which we'll talk about later, one of the interviews that I said was all of this bad press started to come out, and that she later learned that the bad press was actually originating from the studio heads.
Wow.
So they set her up to fail. And I will tell you, I did my best job to be loyal to the whole story of Elaine May, and I tried to watch Ishtar. I don't know that the criticism was unfounded, honestly. But so I couldn't finish the movie. And yet still, I think that this is one of those people that it's like a musician's musician, like may not have made it to popular culture, but almost anybody that's in the business will be able to say Elaine May, and to speak about her absolutely incredible, panoply of works that she's done and the influence that she's had on everything movies. All right, so that's a little bit in the background there about Elaine May and why I watched it. The other thing that I think that this movie has just amazing to watch, Peter Falk and John Cassavetes were best friends, and they are both incredibly talented stage actors, and the quality of the performances in this is just amazing. I mean, I think I ended up doing 3 watches of this, and on the second watch, was thinking about the first watch, and I was thinking about the dialogue in the first 5 minutes when you have both of those characters on screen. And I realized that there's nothing in that written dialogue to indicate that this movie is going to be anything special. And yet, when you watch it, just the things, the way that Cassavetes and Peter Falk are using the dialogue, the use of pauses between them, the way that they're looking at each other, their body language, that there's this intensity in this relationship that first 5 minutes grabs you, like you already want to know what the hell is going on between these two people. So I don't know that Elaine May ever became a fantastic technical director, but it really appears to me that she was exceptionally gifted in directing people and directing actors, and knowing when to stand back, and giving them good material to work with. So I think that that's a good place for me to stop before we get into the actual story of the whole thing. Maybe one last thing that I wanted to mention. I'm also curious as to why Peter Falk said yes to this, because Peter Falk was beloved. So he started doing Columbo in 1971. This movie was filmed in 1973, released in 1976. And both of these characters are unlikable men. They're absolutely unlikable men. And what a risk. Like, you are the most beloved character actor in all of America, and you choose to do this, this son of a bitch character that is going to decimate in many ways this like affable persona that America knows you as. And it's just a fascinating choice that Peter Falk, just said yes to this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's certainly the era of these butchers are leading men, where it's like you can't be a 70s male actor without doing one of these, But it's a weird career.
Yeah, it is. And that's possible. I'm like, yeah, maybe he wanted to try to throw himself into kind of a different quality of character to not get typecast. But I really wonder if there are actors today that would take that same type of risk. I think usually what I see is that actors will kind of stay within their public persona until that beloved TV series is over, and then they immediately jump into a movie that breaks character. Not simultaneously, though.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Aaron,
Aaron.
yeah.
Yeah, I want to hear what Carlos has to say about this. But yeah, I wanted to mention you
Oh no.
mentioned improv. What?
No, no, I already know what that statement means. Oh my god. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I know, no, I know. I want to hear what you say. What you want to say about the movie? No, the improv thing, 'cause it's something that I had written down because it felt like it was improv, and it felt like it was kind of like they were given cues up on a stage and they were just asked to roll with it, which I think is actually literally what had happened. They were doing a lot of ad-libbing and improving along the way, but it just felt like something that was happening a little bit on a stage. There was the exaggerated gestures that they were having throughout. It wasn't just somebody was yelling, it was somebody they're yelling and they're also coming over the counter at you. They're yelling and they're, grabbing you by the collar. So it's the little extra emphasis and um, physical acting put into it. There's also no music throughout the whole thing, so it doesn't feel like it is a theatrical or like a film that's going to have a score behind it. It felt a little bit more intimate, like you were watching two people perform almost live. Very plain sets, a lot of conversations between two people going on, and not like a lot of other people in the same scene. It's focused your attention on the discrete conversation, almost like Before Sunrise. And I don't mean that to slight either of them, but it kind of felt like that. It's like their little odyssey throughout the night, and
Mhm.
something develops throughout it. It's a very simple plot. It's a very kind of one dimensional from beginning to end, with a lot of nuance along the way, but the plot itself is very straightforward.
Yeah,
Were you gonna say
and I'm
something,
going to
Molly?
jump in. Yeah, no, I wanted to jump in because of you can see me nodding. Not everybody is able to see me nodding right now, but um, yeah, I absolutely agree. And as you guys know, that prior to us recording this, I went back and I did a timeline, did timestamps on when particular events happened in the movie, because the way that this unfolds,
Mhm.
there's an unfolding, and it takes its time. Like you start with a black screen and you see all of the credits, and the first thing that you see is a close up of Nicky's face, and then you learn Nicky for 5 minutes, and then Peter Falk's character Mikey comes in, and you spend time with that relationship. And there's this just it's like this spring load that slowly starts to just kind of all the tension releases, and bit by bit
Mhm.
by bit, it is a masterful screenplay.
It's funny because I wrote down like a little timeline also for this one, which I don't normally do on things, but on a second
Yeah.
watch, I felt like that was important. The second time around, I think it was a little bit better than the first time for me. But anyway, Carlos, what do you have to say about it?
No, I'm glad that you mentioned that you guys watched it a second time because the first time I think you're really washed by the 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 friendship at the core of it, right? And you spend so much time trying to
Mm.
engage with it emotionally that the
Mhm.
plot really falls behind. And then once you get that emotional setup, it actually reveals a really clever plot, right? Because this is something I think about a lot, which is setting and time are critical things that you pick before you or when you're setting up your screenplay.
Mhm.
And to set this friendship at the same time of their friendship that's deteriorated, right? That they haven't talked on the phone in months, to Mikey's dismay. And this night, of course, is the night that I think Nicky's stolen $1,000, right? I think from Resnick,
Yeah,
the top guy,
Mhm.
which is not a, I mean, it's a significant amount of money then, but it's still not,
the beers were
everything in the
35 cents
world.
in the bar.
Yeah, that's true. I guess my point being, go ahead.
I'm,
What?
I'm just impressed that Aaron noted that. I totally
Did the
missed
math.
that, and Aaron's like, "Oh my God, 35 cents for a beer!" Yes, thank you, Aaron. No, I
I love how
extra
you
sets of
pointed that out.
eyes.
I'm,
I
I'm,
know.
I'm telling somebody, but no, I just love that the stakes of this, right, are both really high personally, but kind of really, really low in the world. Like, this is
Mhm.
not a story like The Godfather, or I have some other 70s movies here that I was thinking about, like French Connection and Taxi Driver. The stakes in Taxi Driver are pretty low, but he tries to kill a politician. So it's like, there's some larger world. Here in this movie, it's really confined to their little slice of the world. And I think on a second viewing, you kind of grow more into it. And I think it actually
Mhm.
gets better the more you watch it, right? Which
Yeah,
is
yeah, I agree. And I know
right.
that the two of you have heard me say this before. A lot of my frustration with so many movies is that there are movies written by men, for men, about men. And you've heard in other discussions that we've had, I think that we've all kind of realized that even with despicable characters, that they frequently end up being depicted as somehow like worthy of emulating. Like Heat obviously comes to mind. You have two kind of
Boo.
yeah.
Boo. Bad take.
Uh, you can leave the crowd in the background on
I'm
this
Leave it
gonna
in.
because
bring up Heat
Leave
later.
it in.
Actually, no, I have that written down. So go ahead, Molly.
Leave
yeah,
it in.
And then it's my
Go
turn.
ahead,
okay, yeah,
My
Molly.
turn to drop Heat.
yeah. Well, and I use that example specifically because in one group of individuals, it is like absolutely beloved, but it's definitely also a movie where you have two completely dysfunctional people, and yet culturally, it's the type of thing that a lot of guys are like, yeah, I really want to be more like, De Niro's character. Like there's a secret desire to become them, even though that they are so functional. Stories written by men, about men, for men. And this movie is a movie that is written by a woman, about men, for men. So when you bring up that whole thing about the stakes are so low, yes. Like this is where part of that mythos begins to, I think that Elaine May does a great job of just like ripping it apart. Like it's not De Niro. Most of these guys are not De Niro-esque. You leave like kind of not ever hoping that your life never goes down the path of either Mikey or Nicky. The stakes are low, they're invested, they're highly dysfunctional, and nobody comes out of this looking good.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely. Aaron,
So,
you
yeah.
want to talk about Heat? Because Michael Mann's catching strays on this podcast again.
Yeah, and it's not to diss Heat at all, because I know it's probably mentioned on probably 30% of every meeting that we do. It comes up, which is a testament to its kind of endurance.
Not by me, though.
But
Not by me, though.
no,
But
no,
go
no,
ahead.
no,
Go
mostly
ahead.
me. It's mostly me. Yeah, and my take on it. Anyway, there's the scene in Heat where you have Pacino and De Niro, and they're at the dinner table and they're talking, and a lot of people cite that as a super amazing dramatic scene, and I think part of that has to do with the cachet of those individual actors and what they bring to the screen. It's the drama
Yep.
isn't necessarily inherent in there. Yes, you have these two characters that have been trying to elude each other, and they're finally there in this neutral space where they can talk and there's no other tension. But I think if it was any other pair of actors, that scene wouldn't have come across quite as potently as having those two actors in there. I think this movie, Mikey and Nicky, benefits from that also, because I think you have these
Mhm.
actors that have a certain amount of cachet coming into it, and a certain amount of credibility, especially with Peter Falk, um, that it kind of gives it a little bit of gravity beyond what is actually in the drama itself that's unfolding.
Mhm. Yeah, and also Carlos and I think I'm feeling a certain need to defend my use of heat, which I think was another conversation. In theory, we should all. I use it as a touch point
Mhm.
because it is well known, because it is in some ways a paragon of a particular type of movie. It is a movie that is embraced almost uncritically by a certain segment of the population. And yet, in the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, the fact that these two individuals end up being lionized, to me, is problematic. And again, I think that Elaine May and so I use it almost like a metaphor because so many people are familiar with the genre, with the depiction, with the film, and with the cultural love of this movie. um, that said, I just want to circle back. I think Elaine May, potentially because that she's a female writing a woman writing a story about men, for men, does it good job of skewing it just enough, you know, to show where the rough sides are, to show where maybe some of the lies have been told in the depiction of gangsters.
Yes, yeah, and I think he is a great place to compare and contrast the idea of genre and use of genre in film, that he is a crime movie first and then a drama in the background. And this movie, I think, is actually a really great example of a drama. This is not a crime movie. They do not commit well, I guess they commit maybe a few crimes, but there's not a gross exaggeration that I think most people watch Heat, right? And they're like, okay, this last shootout is a symbol of their lives right now, that they're going up a giant wall of establishment and trying to just bust their way through, right? Like, so it works as a movie image, right? Versus this was made in a completely different time under completely different circumstances. Michael Mann had a huge budget, right? And that's a nearly 3-hour long movie where they were like, go off, king. And this movie was very much like, you're many months late to delivering just the footage, so don't ever talk to me again, Elaine May, right? So it's like, they're just so different, and that has to be a huge part of what you're talking about as well. Which
I think that's fair. I think it's a very fair contrast. Yeah, thank you.
That this movie was not supported, quote unquote, in the culture, right?
I'm sorry. No, just if Aaron, you can go, or Carlos, I know that you've done a ton of background research on like the actual making of this movie, which is a bonkers story. Yes. Do you want to throw that in at this point, or Aaron, do you want to share your thoughts?
Aaron.
Oh, I just want to hook on that, just because it seemed like a side plot of a bigger story almost. You'd imagine this is one episode of The Sopranos or something, where it's the two guys and the one's pretty much escorting him to his death, and the other guy sort of knows what's going on and is trying to endear himself. It's like a really long plea for forgiveness. But it doesn't fit into that sort of complex Shakespearean sort of dramatic crime story that it was kind of popular then, popular now too, where it is this kind of broad, expansive thing with all kinds of characters and all kinds of drama and double crosses. This is one discrete a facet of that lifestyle, and it is an exchange between two shitty people that are being shitty to each other, and that's the beginning and end of it.
Yeah, and all the way in the middle. Go, Carlos.
No, The Sopranos, it's right there, because I'm a huge fan, and of course Michael Imperioli is a very outspoken, huge John Cassavetes fan. So all I could think about was like, this guy feels like Chrissy's dad, like, where it's just like these deeply self-destructive, annoying. Right, Nicky's just like the worst. Like, why do you have any friends at all? You're just so annoying.
Why didn't somebody already shoot this guy?
Which is the irony, right? The meeting with Resnick, where he's just so tired and wants to go to bed, and Mikey's just being annoying, but like in a different way, where you're like, you're like 38 or whatever. Can you go home? Like, don't apologize for being annoying. That's annoying.
See, and that's interesting to me that you point out that both of you seem to be pointing out Mikey as the annoying one, because to me, I mean, he's not likable, but like Nicky is terrible. Like, not only just changing his mind over and over and over again, but every single fucking situation that he gets into, he picks a fight with somebody.
Sorry, that's why I meant my first person I was saying is so annoying. Nicky, you stop. Just please, we're on a bus. Do we have to fight the old lady behind us because you're bored or you have bipolar or something? Figure it out, right? But then I love the scene of just the exasperated Resnick, and Mikey's just like, I'm sorry, I annoy you. Like,
oh my God. Yeah.
Don't. I'm so close to hitting you, so.
Yeah. Aaron, why don't you, have you had a chance to kind of dive into your initial impressions on this?
The first viewing, I didn't like it so much. The second viewing, I learned to like it a little bit more. There was a lot of odd editing and continuity issues. I think they were trying, and you've gone into a lot of the background on this a little bit more, the both of you, so you probably have some insight into this. It felt like it was intended to be I don't know, ad lib or non-contemporary, extemporaneous, but
Sure. Big brain on
yeah,
Brad.
I
That's a
know.
that's a big one. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
That's a college word, yeah.
Yeah, I
Word
didn't go
cost
to
me ten
college.
thousand dollars.
You know
Still
that.
paying
I
it off.
mean,
Um,
yeesh.
but no, it seemed like there was a lot of cutting, and I think a lot of the cutting had more to do with assembling the story by way of snipping little pieces of dialogue that weren't necessarily scripted and planned out. Like they had a good piece of dialogue and then they wanted to stick another one in there. So all of a sudden there was a cut where there wouldn't necessarily otherwise be one. So yeah, the continuity was off a lot of
Yeah.
places.
Yeah.
And it was, I noticed it. Probably not many other people would look for that sort of thing, but I noticed it. And the editing was a little jarring on it all
Mm-hmm.
throughout. Um, the fact that the
Mm-hmm.
characters were not really very likable, that didn't help. And I get it. I get what they're trying to do. But at the same time, I do want to enjoy myself, and not being able to relate to the characters and relate to their relationship. Um, it was hard, and I didn't sell well. I don't know what they could have done differently. The acting. So I know you want. I see you raising your hand, Molly. Let me finish my
Yeah,
sentence.
no, what I was going to say
Okay.
was like it was hard to
Okay.
relate. Like as the only woman here, welcome to my world.
Hey, Luna,
Yeah, I
watch
know,
this.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I
Keep
didn't.
going though.
It wasn't even like I could relate to this as a man. They were just they're just awful people, especially
Mhm.
Nikki, who it was tough to even uh, just relate to in a general sense, or even sympathetically. Oh, like this poor guy. There was nothing really there to grasp onto. And so the important part about all this is that you see that their past history has, they're slowly coming out to the course of the conversation. So you're learning a bit about them and about their history. Um, and then you have a little bit of, possible relatability because they're friends. Uh, but it didn't really feel like a friendship that would have lasted anyway. I don't know. They didn't seem like lifelong friends. They seem like they were stuck with each other because everyone else was killed already.
Yeah,
And I don't know. So anyway. It didn't sit well with me. It wasn't an enjoyable experience for me, even though intellectually it was interesting to watch and see the acting. Um, I wasn't munching the popcorn on this one so much. But the second viewing, I was able to see a little bit more of the subtleties, and I really wish that the editing drew your eye a little bit more to those subtleties, because I think they relied on the acting. Um, so usually when the film, the emphasis is going to be editing is going to be used to emphasize character reaction, whereas on stage it's more their physical reaction. There's a lot of physical
right.
reaction in this, and not a lot of emphasis in the editing, like cutting away to somebody when it's something that they're supposed to be reacting to, or having some sort of implication. So I wish they had done that a little bit more, but I was able to see some of the subtlety and some of the them kind of becoming suspicious of each other throughout the course of the night, which was really
Yeah,
interesting, and that is really kind of the heart of the story
right.
is, how much of this secret are they going to unfold to each other, their
Yeah.
individual secrets that they have.
Yeah, well, yes, yes, and again, like I ended up watching this three times, and I agree with you. Like the editing is rough. It definitely is a combination, I think, of Elaine May's um, lack of technical director skills or editing skills. I don't know that I think she knows the stage language incredibly well. I think she knows the language of human interactions particularly well. Maybe not so much the language of constructing a film, of like the art of editing. Uh, Carlos, jump in.
I will say though that the editor had worked on pretty high profile pictures before this movie.
Okay.
Their name was Sheldon Kahn. And of course, part of their job is just saying yes a lot, right? So who knows? Maybe you're right, but
Yeah.
um, I'm glad you guys are calling out the editing. The scene where they're fighting after the watch, there's like a bunch of cuts and there's like all these weird camera movements where I'm like, what's happening? But it's cool. So I kind of forgive it, you know?
Yeah. Well, and so there's a couple other thoughts that Aaron, to just leapfrog off of what you said about it. Like the stories around this movie are wacky, and none of them, like nobody seems to be, after the fact, nobody seems to be a reliable narrator about what really happened. So there's like one commentary on Criterion, and there's this dude that's saying, like, I've read the screenplay and it's amazing. It looks like they're doing improv, but word for word, it's exactly what's on the script. And yet there's another a documentary with the cinematographer who's like, yeah, I mean, they would start like Elaine May wanted to shoot it all at night and she wanted to do it in chronological order. And, I'd be out of film and like the two of the characters, they would be on script and then they would just start doing all this improv. And Elaine May would be like, don't cut. I want all of this. This is gold, that type of thing. So who knows what the real story is? Definitely a lot of it does feel like improv. The other thing, you guys mentioned the watch. And so like the watch ends up being like critical. And yet, if you take a look, if you watch it again at the beginning, when Nicky says, yeah, after they switch coats, yeah, give me your watch. I want to wear your watch. And there's this look on Peter Falk's face. It's the first time in the first half an hour where it looks like he is just going to bite his face off. There's this flash of just unadulterated anger. And then nothing gets mentioned about the watch until kind of this pinnacle where the entire relationship just decimates later on. So like the acting in this, I think, is just phenomenal. And you get these little telegraphs that sometimes you don't pick up until the second or third watch, And you were talking about why you you can't imagine why they would even be friends. I think it comes down to that moment, like not the watch, but when Mikey's brother dies and Nicky is the only person that remembers that. And to me, there's parts of this movie that are absolutely, lots of parts of this movie that are absolutely heartbreaking. But like he lies to Nicky at one point. He says like, yeah, I talk to my wife about this stuff. I tell her everything. And like, she loves to listen to my stories. And it's a bold-faced lie because later on, near the end, when he's back home, he pulls his wife aside and says, have I ever told you this story? And the wife looks incredibly uncomfortable. It looks like the first time that Mikey has ever like wanted to actually talk about a real thing that happened to him, and you just like, it's almost like she's talking to a kid. Oh, well, that sounds awful, and the whole thing is just emotionally uncomfortable to witness these two people that have been married for God knows how long, and evidently he's never talked to her about it before. And yet and I couldn't tell whether he's trying to recreate that relationship so he can let Nicky go, or if he feels like he wants to be a better man than Nicky is. And so he's going to actually do the thing he said that he does to just kind of like right that fib he told. Like the whole thing emotionally is just, icky. I mean, it's heartbreaking, but it's also where you start to feel like, oh my gosh, like you're just a really damaged person.
Yeah.
The third movie I had written down, I'm sorry, Carlos, it was
No,
Banshees
please.
of Inisherin, because I just
Yes.
felt like these were the
Oh,
village
yeah.
idiots, and this is a friendship that is, for whatever reason, it's just collapsing, and there's no real rhyme or reason, and they just are not emotionally prepared to deal with something like this. So they just kind of devolve into madness that other
Yeah.
people around them just can't understand. So, Carlos, go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's a good segue. A question I had for you guys, which is from a screenplay storytelling perspective, these duo movies, right? Aaron, you brought up Before Sunrise. I actually think this movie for me reminded me more of Before Sunset and a little bit more of Before Midnight. Spoilers for those movies, but because the relationship is more developed. Right before Sunrise gets its romantic comedy, hipster romantic comedy of the 90s thing, because they're babies, right? They're very young and they're so cute and they have the big cheeks and they're kind of falling in love right? This movie is not about people falling in love. This movie is very
Yeah.
deeply about people
This is
tearing apart.
like before sunset. Yeah,
Or
definitely.
the movie that you mentioned, which I think is perfect, which is Banshees of Inisherin, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like this is a very developed relationship with people who, and maybe I read this in a lot of characters, so maybe that says something about me. But there's a lot of insecurity, right?
Hmm.
And there's a lot of quote unquote toxic masculinity. I think it's actually deserved in this movie to use that term because I think that's what Mikey is going through is that he wants to be a big bad man, but he really is just not a big bad man. I think if he was to actually not be pressured by the society he works and lives in, he might actually just be kind of a sweet dude, right? But I think his
Mhm.
interaction with Nikki also brings out the worst in him a little bit, right? Molly, you're talking about, and we need to remember the time that this movie takes place in is really, really short. And I
Yeah.
love Molly in that final scene that she is really tired and we're
Yeah.
really tired watching it. The movie, the filmmaking is oppressive. Well, it's impressive, but it's oppressive, right? Like you
Yeah.
feel tired at the end of the movie where her yawn, her performance of tired is impeccable, right? Because
Yeah.
maybe they have talked about this, but she's like, I usually go to bed at 10. So 4 a.m, I am eepy. I am falling over, right? Like now is not the time, right? Sorry, I'm off track. Duo-led movies, right? Like, do you think that this movie is successful in that? Because for me personally, I think one of the things I found so impressive the first time I watched it is both characters feel like they get enough time without this movie being 3 hours long, like in
Hmm.
Heat, right? Where Heat has many characters, but you got the two mains and they want you to understand those characters. Or Banshees of Inisherin is another really good example, which is a little bit longer than this. This movie's pretty short and I think accomplishes a lot in that realm. What do you guys think?
Oh, yeah. There's not a lot actually happening. There's one thing that's happening. There's one little MacGuffin, which is there's going to be a hit, and then you're trying to figure out you're learning about who these characters are, and they're kind of learning about each other's motivations in that scene. Yeah, I mean, there's very little else that goes on other than these kind of general, kind of superficial conversations and interactions with other people. There's the wife, there's the girlfriend, I guess, who had the baby. There's the very uncomfortable interaction with the baby. There's interactions in the bars. There is the really, really, very, very, very long scene in that poor woman's apartment
That
where
scene is
there
tough. Tough.
that scene is yes, yeah,
Oof.
yeah,
And
very upsetting.
yeah, I'm going to
Bring it.
say, like, I want you to keep going, but hopefully, after we kind of hash through this bit of it, the performances by the women, I think, are exceptional. And I would like to make sure that we give adequate time to talking about some incredibly difficult roles that
Mhm.
were played with dignity, I think. But go for
Preach.
it.
Preach. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, yeah. No, that scene was insanely long because the second viewing, I fast forwarded through it, and it still seemed
Preach.
like a long
Hmm.
scene. Just because it was the first viewing, I was almost like, well, I think I might turn this off now. But I went through with it. Um, anyway, yeah, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, as like a buddy picture,
Hmm.
um, it it does work. But I think an hour and a half or however long it is, I think it was probably ample for the depth of the story they were telling because they're telling the history and then they're kind of telling the story about the hit and what these two people suspect the other one knows about what's going on. So it's sparse in terms of those elements of the plot. So there's a lot of room for the actual character development. I think it was almost too much because you kind of get it after a while, and I think they indulge a little bit in rambling and letting these actors just kind of do their thing.
Hmm.
Which, if you're enjoying the movie, that's enjoyable to watch. So it's fine because you're there to see the performances of these two good actors, and you get to see it a lot.
You do, and that may be the linchpin for the entire movie. Like I was fascinated to watch how these two just masterclass actors played off of each other.
Hmm.
If that doesn't hit you, I can't imagine getting through this movie without just like talking to your friend who recommended about why did you make me watch this? Like it's if you can't get into that piece of it, then you might struggle with this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's such a specific friendship, right? Because they're not friends. I keep using friendship. I really don't feel that they're friends, but that's my personal perspective on what friendship is. Usually it's based on respect and adoration, or maybe not adoration, but at least respect. Hopefully. I don't think there's a lot of respect going either direction. Molly, or was it Molly or Aaron who mentioned the absolutely just awful scene with the baby? He's like, hold my thumb.
Oh, I did. Yeah.
Hold my
Oh
thumb.
God, yeah. It's really really well done. That was probably one of the most illustrative scenes of the movie in terms of letting you know who this character is, and almost like if they open the movie with this, you know everything you need to know about that character
Yep.
right there.
Mhm.
But it is so uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
and I love that. That sorry, Molly, just quickly, I love that it
mm,
doesn't come at the beginning of the movie; it comes at the end of the movie, where he's like, "Well, I don't know where else to go. The movie is
Yeah.
open, but they never go."
yeah.
Go ahead, Molly.
Yeah, well, no, but it just occurred to me that they do with Nicky the same thing that they did with Mikey later on. So Nicky has told Mikey in the bar, like, I love this age. You know, she always holds onto my thumb, but
Hmm.
maybe that hasn't happened. But he goes there and he tries to force this level of intimacy in the same way that later on Mikey goes to his wife and tries to force this level of intimacy that needs to be built over time with building trust and comfort and love and affection, you know? So they're actually identical. And I agree with you that I don't know that this ever should be used as a yardstick for what a friendship is. Yet I do think that there are some friendships or like the relationship between the two of them feels more like siblings. Like even the scene the second time that
Yeah.
they're on the bus and they're doing the hand slap thing and they're actually trying to hurt each other. Like it felt like two brothers, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there definitely are some friendships for some people that are forged solely on shared childhood experiences. You were here when this happened. I can't talk
Hmm.
about this to anybody else, you know, whether because of
That
quote
is
unquote,
100% of this friendship is just
yeah,
that. Yeah, and it is really, really tragic because there's physical intimacy in terms of almost like a tenderness that they have between each other, like
yeah,
siblings.
yeah,
But yeah, it's none of the, like you said, the things that are built up over time. It's
yeah.
just the anchor to a moment in time, and that's all they really have.
Right, right. And to, yes, and to a period of time, maybe, like, again, I'm going to shove it in that framework of toxic masculinity, maybe at like one of the rare times when they were still feeling and communicating. Because there's other places like, I wish your mom was alive. I wish your dad was alive. Like you're the only person I still know that's still alive. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that that is the reason why there's still power in that relationship between these two people.
Mhm.
It's funny you bring up the "I wish your dad was still alive" because I was thinking about that kind of idea in this movie a little bit. It does not sound like he was very cool with his dad, or his dad was very cool with him. So, or he's like, "Oh, he was a great man." It's like I feel like he beat you because this I
Yeah.
just, the entire movie is people being dishonest. And
Hmm.
I think that's one of the hard things to watch is I think we all watched it and felt just say the truth. Like we're talking about, there's so many reviews of this movie that are like, oh, it's finding out that your best friend sucks. It's like they're not best friends,
Mm.
first of all. Second of all, he knows he sucks, but he also sucks, right? And it's like they kind of
Mhm.
are in this abusive codependent relationship, right?
Yeah.
Because Nicky clearly doesn't respect Mikey, right? I said that for you. I said it loud
Right.
enough so that you could hear one of my favorite parts of the whole movie. And it's in our opening we had that it's the last night of a friendship, but I guess what I should have said is it's the last night of any sort of relationship, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, spoilers. Mikey gets, or Nicky gets brutally shot in Mikey's front porch after Mikey made it clear that they got their own private cops or whatever, however he's saying, and they drive around the block, and he's being look, I'm not trying to sympathize with like organized crime heads, but he's being like super annoying, where it's like, we tried killing your friend and now
My
you're telling me,
my HOA wouldn't like it.
what the hell are you talking about? I don't even know your last name. Now we're talking about HOAs. Yeah, no.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. They it's all this planning to do this kind of clandestine assassination, and it's broad daylight in the suburbs. Front door, screaming and yelling.
I love it. And he's not running away. He could try and run down the street or something. He's not. He's almost accepted it, right?
He's still
like,
pleading, just like he's been doing it since the beginning of the movie. Yeah.
It's an image. Sorry, Molly, just real quick. It's a dramatic image, right? That he's clinging on to Mikey in his last moments, right? And it's like, well, if I ain't got Mikey, I ain't got nobody, because I already messed over Resnick. None of the women in my life want me in their life at all, and the cops are probably on their side.
Bingo. Yeah. So yes, and so yes. A couple of things. First of all, it seems like part of Mikey's motivation with this whole thing is he wants to be the most important person to somebody. I mean, there's that terrible story about how his brother is dying, and this watch, and my dad gave it to him. Like he wanted to give it to me. Of course, he's going to give it to me. I'm the oldest. He really wanted, but because he's dying, it was okay for him to give it to me. And then I took it back after my brother died. Like, it's terrible. And you just get the sense also that is what he's wanting out of Nicky now that his dad's dead. He wants to be the most important person to Nicky, not even his wife, to Nicky, which again, I think is like in that spectrum of toxic masculinity, where the only opinion that's important to you is your male peers, not the relationships that you count on and that sustain you, but how those male relationships that you haven't built anything with, how those people see you. And like Mikey is kind of the walking embodiment of that. The interesting thing also, to get to Carlos, back to what you were saying, is that you see through the course, this timeline, these segments where, he calls Mikey, I got your towel. So he goes to Mikey first, and then he goes to the mistress, and he goes to the wife, and the wife rejects him. So he goes back to the mistress. She rejects him. And then Mikey rejects him after all of this. Or actually, I guess Mikey rejects him first. So then he goes, right. But he always ends up, like the only time I hear from you is when you're sick, when you're feeling bad, And so he does that. And again, it's like this family, it's familial. It's a family relationship. It's siblings. It's not friendship. He goes, the last place he goes is to the person that has been force feeding him antacids, that talks to him in baby voices.
Yeah. Just quickly, I want to say, I think it's brilliant that he's helping him with his ulcer at the beginning, right? Like that's important to this whole building of the relationship in that first 5 minutes, because it's sort of like when you're fighting with a sibling and they hit you right in the ear, like perfectly. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry, you moron. But like they actually hug you, so where it's like, yeah, I'm actually going to take care of you. I can't help but feel bad when you feel bad. Right. Yeah. So they have that. But at the same time, it's like, you're like a bad man. You're not just like being a jerk. You're like actively destructive to the community. So we've passed the point of,
and to everybody. He's destructive to everybody who gets into his circle.
Yes. Yeah.
So if there's more to say on this, please, gentlemen, jump in. I, again, just want to make sure that we talk about the female actors in this as well, too, who pulled it. So
should we take a quick break? Regroup?
Sure.
And
break that.
Wait. Now,
what? Go.
We're live from Saturday night.
Carlos, you mentioned you had some background information on this. You did a little bit more research.
I think enough of some of the stuff we've talked about, but I think there's one important fact that we want to talk about in terms of talking about the post-production on this movie is that it took forever.
Yeah.
A. B, they went way over budget and schedule. But the fun fact that always gets thrown around is that they shot 1.4 million feet of film for this movie, which, to put in perspective, a 2-hour feature is about 11,000 feet. right? So we're talking about magnitudes and magnitudes of just two
Yeah.
awful dudes just riffing on hating women and immigrants and stuff. No, that's not really in the movie, but
In 10 minutes at a time. Like each canister was 10 minutes worth of film.
woo-wee. So I think, Aaron, that adds into what we were talking about that you brought up about the jointy editing. I mean, imagine going through that.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. And also because, you're pulling one snippet from here and one snippet from there. It reminded me of like you see YouTube videos where it's just a straight shot of their face and they're talking, but they went back and they edited out all the ums and the ahs and the pauses. So they'll be talking and it sounds like a complete sentence, but then their head just moves all of a sudden to
Yep.
one side. It's sort of felt like that, but in a larger scale where you had a conversation that was going, and for some reason it just cut to something else, some other line, but it was from a different perspective, and it didn't come. There's a language to it, and it kind of muddled the language of what the editing was for. And I kind of liked when it just held with them for longer shots, without a lot of the jumping around.
Which I wonder if that plays into this part of her career, right? That she is very successful in a theater landscape. She had made a couple of comedies that were very, very liked, right? And now she's doing something a little bit more serious. And Molly, this might be a question you have a lot of interest in answering, but I gotta imagine, no matter a person's being male or female, if you shoot that much stuff for this movie, no matter what, the studio head is going to be upset, right?
Um,
Because that's the record by a long shot. Is that
is it
much
really?
movie, where it's
Of
like,
course,
oh
my,
my
my,
God.
my brain goes to Kubrick. Like nobody has measured Kubrick's. He's notorious for 148 takes for a single scene. Like I don't know, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
As a new director, would that piss people off? I would say yes. The other part, which I mentioned earlier, is it doesn't look like she was mentored in this in the same way that other directors, male obviously, have been mentored into becoming directors. Is either what could she have done if she had a Spielberg analog that was there to help teach her the business and the art of budgeting and setting up cameras and making film and making sure that you've got coverage so you don't have to go back and actually get coverage because nobody told you
Was
you
this the
needed to have
first time,
coverage.
the
This,
first film she directed?
this is the third. She only did 4.
Oh, okay.
This is her
Okay.
entirely original first screenplay.
Correct.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I think there is a little bit more of something precious about this one, right? Versus kind of the comedies.
Yeah, I think there was, and of course, like one of the, and again, like there's so much mythology built up around this movie that I don't know even what's true, but like the story is that the studio wanted to recut the whole thing, and she hid it. Like part of the reason why it was delayed was because
In a
she took
garage.
she would take rolls of the film, the actual film, and she hid it in different places around Hollywood until the studio heads caved in and said, okay, we'll do it your way.
I don't think a mentor is going to fix that.
No, I know, but just the
premeditated.
brass ovaries on this person to be like, no, like I will physically move these canisters of film all around Hollywood so that you can't find it.
Yeah.
Like that's just brilliant.
Something else in the post-production, Aaron, that you brought up earlier that I want to talk about is how quiet this movie is. I mean, there is a ton of diegetic sound, right? There's a bunch of sound of them running down the street and shuffling and that kind of stuff. But there is not a lot of music, right? This movie is pretty quiet, right? And don't you think that's part of the kind of unmoviness of it that makes it hard to watch the first time, where you're like, nothing's thrusting me other than what's happening on screen. It feels like a sad play for a lot of the movie, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are scenes that are pretty robust. I do like there was the second bar they're in where they almost get into a fight. That was kind of really well put together in terms of how they laid that out. And there was music in that, and there was sound, and you had a broader sense of it being a scene, um, where it felt a little bit more like you were in a movie as opposed to watching two people acting on stage
Mhm.
or in a set somewhere. And or like the bus scene, I like that one a lot. Um, just because I don't know, somehow it felt like they were using the environment a little bit more as opposed to just having two people occupy a space.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not complaining,
Yeah.
but yeah, I do hear what you're saying. And that was noticeable throughout. That there was a lot of when they weren't talking, it was dead silent.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, and just as a counterpoint to that, there is definitely a period in American film where this goes on. John Cassavetes, again, Woman Under the Influence. It's the same type of a thing. It's and Cassavetes has that reputation of he would come up with a screenplay, he would get people together, hand somebody a camera, and the cameras would just roll. And it was this whole idea that you can capture on film these realistic interactions between human beings in some of the more emotionally compressed portions of their lives. So it was almost this
Yeah,
cinema verite type of a thing that was going on at the time. So is this
yeah.
Elaine May being inexperienced, or is it her trying to do things that she's seen other people do and the effect that she liked?
That was
Yeah.
the presentation, and I think it was deliberate how they
Hmm.
wanted to present it. So it was successful in that, I think, to a certain extent of creating that environment and not jarring you out of it. It's like, you get used to watching movies that, when they go from one scene to the next, there's a 5-second clip of a pop song in there that just kind of rolls and then fades away. And it has, nothing to do with the story or anything whatsoever. It's just a little bit of a gold coin to the audience, but it's superfluous.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always hate doing my hot takes for other movies on the movie we're not talking about, but there is a movie that came out the year this movie came out that I compare this movie to Taxi Driver by some guy who's still
Mhm.
working. God, that
That
bum.
guy, yeah.
What?
That bum. Um, but that movie, I do not like the score. And everybody is so in love with the jazz sort of. It's not whimsical, right? But it's also not oppressive like the rest of the movie. And people are in love with it. And I've never felt it worked for me. I think a big part of that is I didn't live in New York in the 70s. I hear a lot of
Mhm.
critics from the 70s who lived in New York who are like, oh
Mhm.
man, that score just, it was my life. I'm like, ugh, I'm sorry. That sucks. This movie doesn't have that. Right. Instead, it's fully realized in a very realistic world. I mean, the other component to the filmmaking that I think that clearly we do not see anymore, but this movie gets really dark where it's dark. Does that make sense? In the
Yeah.
Yep.
cinematography, that shot of the guy running away from the car, which is incredible, and I wonder how many takes of that they did. I wonder if they had 3 cameras rolling on that one or not. Um, but the rest of the frame is just black. Basically, all
Mhm.
you can see is that one or those 2 car lights, right? Which I'm
Mhm.
sure they juiced up a little bit to make it even brighter, right, and make the rest even darker. But that mixed with the lack of score, mixed with just the worst dudes, it's like, oh god, this is
Yeah.
not a
Mhm.
good hang. Like you gotta watch, I don't know, Ted Lasso after this or something.
Yeah. Well, and just to get into the cinematography, there are a few places that I don't know whether it's intentional or not, but it's that darkness is used to amazing effect. Near the end, when Mikey is riding in the car with the hitman, it's all dark, and you just see this like stretch of light across
Mhm.
Mikey's eyes, and you see little flashes of Ned Beatty's face in there, but for the most part, you're just seeing the section of Mikey's face from, like the upper lip to his eyebrows to his forehead. And so you're just watching him, you know, just basically like, of course that's him. Like, of course I know who it's going to be.
And it seemed like natural. Oh, sorry. It seemed like natural darkness and
Yeah.
not specifically staged darkness where they have a completely dark set and then they have the strip
Hmm.
from a spotlight or something, and they construct that kind of light darkness. This seems like they were actually out in the dark, and they are actually just using as much light as they possibly could from whatever sources, and
Yeah.
it made it feel a lot like you were outside and not in an Ansel Adams photo.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a Jarmusch. It's not
Mhm.
carefully constructed, palettes of light and dark to this. So there's that one. I think the other place where I felt like the light dark contrast worked like remarkably well was when they're in the mistress's apartment and Mikey is in the back is
Oh,
in the
yes.
background, in this well lit kitchen, and you see the red of it, and the front room where the forced, basically the rape is happening, the forced sex is happening, is all dark, and you hear these little sounds and so forth. Just that depth of field in that, and the fact that, and you get the sense that this isn't the first time that this has happened. Mikey has been in this situation before,
Hmm.
where he's just trying to ignore the really uncomfortable events that are happening just the next room over, just waiting for Nicky to, stop being an
Yeah.
asshole.
You mean somebody who should be arrested? That's past asshole for
Yeah.
me. That's like he's
Yeah.
like an actual just terror to society at that
Yeah.
level. You know?
Like beat up, pulled off.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Walked out. All of
Now,
it.
now that felt to me like a set, so I'm going to refer to it like a set. I don't know if it was an actual apartment or whatever, per Elaine May's wishes. But there are these streaks of light in the main room in the top that kind of come out. To your point, Aaron, sometimes you, or maybe as Molly, you catch these images that they add in the edit of the light hitting Peter Falk just right. And I
Mhm.
feel like they didn't do every take the same way. That
Yep.
was just one take they liked, and they're like, oh,
Mm.
let's use that. It's dramatic, right? And I think setting up these areas, yeah, I learned this listening and reading about The Godfather Part 2 in particular, which is also a very dark movie, which came out before this, right? That there were a lot of fights between Coppola and the cinematographer, Gordon Willis, I think, where he was like, no, I want them to be able to move freely in the frame. And the cinematographer and the lighting team are like, no, they can't if
I
we're going to
can't.
light it this way. That's not how this can work, right? And they make concessions about blocking and yada, yada, yada. That scene felt pretty disjointed in terms of what ends up in the edit, though
Yeah.
I think it comes through and that's still such a satisfying image in the way they've lit the foreground, right, versus that back room, which for whatever reason reminds me of the Cure album with the fridge on it, the first one, right? I don't know if you guys are Cure fans, but I always just think Mikey's in
Venus Murder?
the no, wrong band, wrong
That's the
album.
Smiths. I'm sorry. No, no, no. Yeah, all right.
Take that
I
out.
just thought
Edit
fridge,
that out.
meat.
Edit that out. Three Imaginary Boys.
One bad reference.
Mikey is back there and he's always kind of alone in those, and he's framed just perfectly, right? And you're seeing everything. I think it still comes through really in a powerful way. That scene, as we've discussed, is really difficult to get through. It's very
Hmm.
hard. Molly, I'm glad you used the word you used to describe what happens between them, because it's
Mhm.
not, irreversible, that scene, right?
Right. Right.
But that is what they're getting at in the interaction, right? So
Right.
um, that kind of gets swept over a lot because it's so quiet and dark. I think that not enough people cue on that's basically rape happening
Hmm.
there. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yep. And so, are you guys good to dive into these
let's
difficult
do it.
performances?
Let's do it.
Yeah,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
because so there's two main female characters in this, and and again, I know that you guys have heard me say this, and again, I think that heat works as just kind of a metaphor for a lot of this. Um, I think often that women in movies by men, about men, for men, women are what I've referred to as warm props.
Mm.
That the only thing that they show you is some aspect of the man's persona, you know? And again, I think Heat for me always kind of like rose to the top of like, why do we even have the wife who just pouts, you know, or like whatever. This is different. You actually have these female characters that are treated terribly in this, and the actors, the female actors that play these women, um, bring to them their own stories, their own personalities, their own needs and wants, their own objections in ways that seem very valid as human beings. Um, Both of those scenes that we have, the one when Nicky is interacting with the mistress, and then later when he's interacting with the wife, these women are forced into situations dealing with this person that they don't want to. Um, and there's violence, there's, you know, there's the sexual violence, there's physical violence that happens with the wife as well too. I think in both cases, given that time frame, you know, as difficult as it is to watch, you know, I think I can understand their actions, because this is before the whole idea of domestic violence was even part of the parlance. You know, like they didn't call
Mhm.
the cops because the cops, like, nobody's coming, nobody's going to come to save them. You know,
Yeah,
the best that they
yeah.
can do is to um, mollify this really dangerous man, however, you know, whatever it takes, until he's willing to leave, you know. And they,
I think the
yeah, and they break on occasion to talk about what their real objections are to him, to the relationship, to how they're talked about, to how they're treated. But then they go back to, you know, just wanting him to be comfortable enough to feel loved enough, you son of a bitch, so that you'll walk out of my fucking door.
yeah. I think the woman who played Jan, who was the wife,
Hmm.
um, was excellent. I think just in the way that, like you're saying, just came across that mollifying, that sort of pacifying him just
Hmm.
enough, and just giving just a little bit enough seriousness to her consideration of him without, you know, shoving him out a window or down a flight of stairs. To just give him that little bit of an inch of a ledge to stand on, and then getting out of there. And that was she did it really, really well, because it seemed like that character was very sympathetic. And whether that sympathy was something because there was some sort of passion that was trying to come across, or it was just to demonstrate that she was kind of on his side, so he wouldn't turn
Hmm.
against her.
Hmm.
It didn't make a difference. It was that kind of um, really, really kind of subtle acting of having an intimate exchange with somebody that you really, really, really don't want to be in front of you. It came across really well.
Yeah. Yeah. Carlos, what did you think about those two women and those performances and how it fits into the story?
Well, before I forget, the women that we're forgetting who have an amazing performance in this movie are the two black women in the diner while Mikey's getting the creamers. And they're just in the back chewing scenery. They're like staring at the camera and they're like awkwardly laughing. I get the impression that they didn't prep them like, hey, he's going to do this. And they're like looking around like, is this allowed? Which is a scene I love, and we'll get back to it. No, the women in this movie are incredible. Molly, I think both you and I looked at some of the backgrounds of these actors, and they did
Hmm.
not work a lot, right? Maybe they were really popular in the theater landscape. Um, they knew these people, and I think Elaine May, it sounds like she was very involved with the casting, so I will credit her as well as the casting director of getting these particular performers to usher what Aaron you were talking about, right? These subtleties that have to be done in silence, basically, right? Like, I think, Molly, we were talking about the difference between theater and film acting. And I think great film performances have a subtlety that is said without words or grand gestures. And
Hmm.
that's what they're doing in these scenes, right? They're performing at a very high level in film acting that the guys get to kind of be theatrical and loud and move around, right? But the women are uh, not just victims in the story, but victims in the scenes and how they're kind of made film wise. Does that make sense? Right, that they kind of get these little boxes to perform in a lot against
Mhm.
the Mikey and Nicky. But the wife, man, when she busts out of the box for a little bit, I find to be some of the most exhilarating part of the final act, right? Because somebody's finally like saying the truth. And I brought that up
Mm.
earlier, right? That this movie is so much lying that
Yeah.
finally these women are being honest, particularly hers being really honest. Um, and that's why I think in the end they're just so likable. Is it's like finally somebody's telling this guy, and it's like good for her, good for the daughter too. Don't want to touch his thumb. You don't know what he's touched.
Do
Nasty.
you think? Yeah, and it like the degree of the violence in the stories, the depictions of both of these women's short time on film, um, is is bad. I think it is. It was hard to watch it the first time. Aaron and I did the same thing. I fast forwarded through both of those scenes the second time,
Mhm.
other than to pick up on a little bits of dialogue that I wanted to remind myself. Do you think that the violence was necessary?
Uh, with the wife, maybe with the mistress, that poor woman. I don't think so. I want to say something that Carlos mentioned the word lying, and I don't know if it may just maybe it's more insincerity or a lack of sincerity or a lack of awareness. There's definitely deceit and deceitfulness, but I think a lot of these men are just not aware of what's going on a lot of the time and not aware of what's going on with each other. So in addition to the deceit, there's a lot of uh, a lack of a genuineness because I don't think know how to do it. They just no practice at it, and that's part of the tragedy of the movie. But Molly, going back to what you were saying, yeah, the I don't know if the depictions of it needed to be so blunt
Mhm.
in order to get what they wanted across. Obviously, with the mistress, it's this woman who all you have to do is say you love her, and then she does whatever, and it's that is kind of Nicky's ideal person, probably, or that's maybe what he thinks it's all about. Is you say these words, and then you have lovemaking, and then then you have a relationship where it's not there's no depth behind it, there's no sincerity behind it. Um, but yeah, that physical act was aggressive and violent and uncomfortable to watch all the way through.
Mhm.
Um, but then yeah, with the wife, um, especially with the baby in the background and mom in the next room, and this sort of sense of entitlement to be able to do that on his part. It's not like nobody's watching. He's doing
Mhm.
this in front of mom. So there is a lack of recognition that what he's doing is even wrong and that it's
Right.
something that is natural and that he ought to be doing. And that makes it even more disturbing as a character. People still associate fear and respect as the same thing sometimes, and it's yeah, the scene with Jan and him, it's almost like somebody backing away from a gorilla. You got to bow
Mhm.
your head and seem submissive and passive, and that is not that is not you're not doing that because you respect the gorilla. You do that because you are terribly afraid of the gorilla and you want to get out of the situation.
Yeah.
So it's not a gesture of like you would bow and step backward from a queen.
Yeah.
It's not reverent.
Yeah. This is not a
There's no
trust-based
affection there.
relationship. Yeah, that's
Right.
exactly it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What I do like about um, Nikki's characterization is it does remind me of a personality type, at least I have run into, which are people who are very, very good first time, second time. They're very seductive people. They're funny. John Cassavetes is, I think, a pretty handsome dude, other than being 5'6" or whatever. I'm just kidding. My short kings, I'm also not very tall. But he seems very seductive and he seems
Mhm.
very good at that. I mean, he would make a killing now with credit cards. Could you imagine these kind of dudes, just like, let me take you out. I know people, I know places. It reminds me a lot of what I feel Henry Hill should have been more of in Goodfellas, Aaron, where it's like, this guy's pretty great. He's got a ton of money. Everybody's scared of him, so we get cool stuff. I don't have to live in fear until you only live in fear because that's what they will eventually turn into, right? Like they're not going to be nice and sweet to you. And I love.
He's more like Joe Pesci's character.
Correct. Much closer to that, though. I don't think anybody gets close to that. But he's like that, right? And so I could get why it might be seductive the first time you meet him, but I think what is ultimately failed in at least the movie is that he's a deeply manipulative person who worms his way into these toxic relationships and knows what to say and what to do and how to pick certain people a certain way. And I actually see that in Mikey as well. I see it in the scene where he forgets he's a gangster, asking for creams. Let me get creams, blah, blah, blah. And this guy's like cleaning something. He's like, no, we don't do that, blah, blah, blah. And he like remembers like, yeah, I could just like scare this guy, right? Let me hop the counter and just be like, give me the creams because I'm crazy. Yeah, he pulled that "cause I'm crazy" line.
Because I'm crazy.
I think they're similar in that way, that they can try and I think that's what a lot of psycho gangsters attempt to be, at least in real life, are really great people that they can read people, figure out what pushes their buttons, and really push those buttons, right? And I think it's implied for me that Nicky is like that, right? But everybody is eventually getting sick of him. And the big difference between the men and the women in this story is that the women have to live in fear of him, and the men get to basically be like, the next time I see you, I'm going to kill you. And the next time you see me, I will kill you. Right? So it just goes to show the power dynamics of those communities in that moment, I think, really well.
Do we want to move on to final thoughts?
Yeah, actually, two things that were kind of on my mental list. Getting back to the screenwriting of it. And again, I think that there's just masterful things. I was kind of paying attention to the amount of time Ned Beatty's character, the hitman, and which kind of segues into Resnick. Elaine May does this great job because it's like this wedge, right? So you see about 15 minutes in, 20 minutes in, I think is the first time that you see the hitman. It's just a few minutes. And then the next time you see him on screen for a few more minutes and a few more. And the amount of time that this pending death, like literally she takes it from, you've got a minute, 30 seconds at the beginning when you first get introduced to the hitman. And that by the time you get to Resnick, that you've got like a 5-minute scene. And it literally, like there's this amplitude of time on screen of this hitman that serves as a wedge of this impending, this fracture that's happening, is just a lovely way, just a lovely temporal construction of building that event, building that tension, and it's getting closer and closer because you see the hitman on screen more and more. And I didn't pick that up until like the third watch, but it was just like this really subtle thing to use time to convey the just this, that you have an end, you have a really awful end coming. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I got to say, there are so many wonderful, they could be ad libs, this could be improv lines, but there's like these wonderful lines, like when they decide Nicky wants to go visit his mom, his dead mom in the grave, right? And they get off the bus and and Nicky says something about like, like we're going to like break into the graveyard. We've done this before. And Mikey says, no, we haven't done that before. And while Nicky's saying, yeah, come on, you hear Mickey say, okay, maybe once or twice just to steal flowers, and it's just like, what? like who steals flowers out of a graveyard? It's this little throwaway line.
Oh, geez.
It's just, I know. So, and the whole thing about like, I got your towel at the very beginning. Like there are these wonderful, just little throwaway lines in the whole thing that are eminently quotable. Anyway, so that was it. And like, I'll chalk it off to the performers for me. It could be Elaine. It could be them. Who the hell knows at this point? But, just great shit.
On the hitman, really quick, we haven't talked enough about two characters who have heat check performances. The hitman, who's in a lot of the movie, Molly, as you mentioned, which is also such a cinematic change from maybe a theater production of this, right? That you cut away to this hitman and it starts the clock of like, all right, here we go, right? And there's more stuff happening. Who is this guy? And he's realized that dude sucks at being a hitman. Right, where he's like, where do I go? And they're like, oh, the other way. You're like not even in the, and I love how he's complaining to Mikey,
I couldn't
right?
find a place to park.
I was there 45 minutes, all right, and you never came. Or by the end of this, I won't even break even. This sucks. I'm having a terrible night. None of the guys hire me. This is supposed to be an easy one. I love that he's complaining like an Uber driver.
I know.
The other performance nobody's brought up is the bus driver. Come on.
Yay!
Walsh.
Yeah.
Just like, hey guy, we got a problem, Or the woman with the, I don't want to get involved with what'd she say?
Your type.
Your
your
something
kind?
like that. Something like that, right? Or your,
oh yeah.
It was
Your
something.
element, I think.
Your
Element. Yes.
Element.
Your element.
My element. Just great because we know these guys. We know these guys in real life where it's like, to quote a Kubrick movie, Molly, what is your major malfunction, numbnuts? Where it's like, were you born to be just so annoying? Come on, just grow up, please, for everybody. Molly, on your point quickly about the screenplay, I think too often people view pacing in movies as just the action set pieces. When do they happen? How far are they away from the ending? But for a drama, then your action set pieces need to be the key moments of the relationship that you're diagramming. I think that happens in every great drama. I'm not doing some groundbreaking thing about drama writing. But when we think about screenplay writing, and Molly, you've very kindly put together this timeline, you can tell that this screenplay is constructed the same way you would construct any genre screenplay, right? And of course, when you were looking at this, we're looking at the last way it's written, right? Which is the edit, right? And like the Hitman stuff, who knows what that was written like in the script, right? But in the edit, it helps push it along in this way because the story is being pushed along in this way. And I think this is a movie I will point to when I think, what is a great genre movie for drama, right? And like, how do you structure that sort of thing? I think this movie is really just a great example of that and so well written in that way, right? Because I think a lot of people think of great screenplay writing as great dialogue, or they think about it as great ideas, which is part of it. But putting it together in the edit when it's a director-writer combo is extremely important as well. And I think this movie, while it is a 70s movie and it is very slow by today's standards, I think per 70s movies, it's excellent and it's great in that department. And
yeah, I agree. And like I said, there's this unfolding, and like nobody's a reliable narrator in this. Like, so when Nicky first says like there's a hit out on me, you don't know whether you can believe him or not, And then when you see when you see Mikey walk away from the phone, you don't know if he's part of this or not. You are 30 minutes into this movie until you have slowly been given enough information to finally put the whole piece together, where you finally have the hitman in there and confirm that Mikey is working with the hitman. 30 minutes into the film, and you're just given these little bits in, like you have to participate, but it's just this gorgeous setup, this unfolding that you've got to stick with it before. And it's like, you're third of the way into the film before you really even know who all the players are and how they're related, brilliant.
And my reading of it, and I'm hoping it's the same as your reading of it. Nicky calls Mikey at the beginning, already knowing that Mikey's likely the guy who put the hit out on him. And not calling him because he's his best friend and he needs his friend around, but because he's going to try to plead his case to not be killed in a subtle way without directly pointing the finger at him. Like he suspects, and that's his last best shot of surviving this, is kind of re-endearing himself.
Is to play Mikey, which starts at "Give me your coat."
Yeah.
Give me your coat.
Yeah. They do that, and yeah, right. Is
Interesting.
that kind of how you read it too?
No, but I
I
think you're
didn't.
right.
No? Okay.
I didn't, but
No,
that's great. And I'll rewatch it next time with that in mind.
yeah, yeah,
That's what I was kind of thinking the second time around, was that it was a long kind of like pleading. It wasn't very elegant because Nicky is a mess,
Mhm.
and he's not good at relationships in general. So it's kind of his, I don't know, his kind of buddy attempt, and also to kind of put it off as long as possible. So anyway,
yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah, just last point real quick, Molly. 30 minutes in to hit our really, really great plot point one, right? Which
Mhm.
is and you use the term unreliable narrator, right? For me, I always think of Fight Club, right? Where
Mhm.
it's clearly from the perspective of one of the characters. What I like about this movie, and I think makes it really hard to watch, is that the camera is completely honest, right? The person in the camera watching the camera, us, is completely honest. We see everything, which makes these turns in character really interesting later, right? Where he's like, oh, I tell my wife everything. And then we see the scene with the wife, right? Like
Right,
that's what
right.
makes this movie very
Mhm.
different from something like a 90s gotta have a big twist thing, right? It's kind of
Right.
just like, no, it's just depressing. These guys suck and like they're liars and they're or maybe not lying, but they're very insincere, to put it the way Aaron put it, right? That they are insincere with themselves and not totally truthful, I guess.
All relationships are based on manipulation. Like
Yes, yeah,
there's zero capacity for either these people to be authentic human beings and to make authentic connections and to build trust. Um, and I don't know if, in theory, I suppose every child has the opportunity to learn how to do that, and whatever that seed in them obviously was just quashed early on.
yeah,
Like they are so far removed, is that they don't even realize how far removed they are.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Final
Yeah.
thoughts, anybody? I gave all of my thoughts. I'm an open book. I'm unlike Mikey and Nicky. You guys know everything
Those
about
were
me.
my thoughts.
Yeah, I got a chance to replay or to share with you the yeah, just to steal flowers line. So I think I'm good.
Yeah.
And then our last
All right.
question that we usually do, right? Would you recommend
Yeah.
this? I'm going to amend this because I don't think any of us in good conscience could recommend this to a person. We're like, oh, you're free tonight? You should watch Mikey and Nicky. It's hilarious. What kind?
It's
What
not a first date movie.
what kind of person? Oh, funny you say it. No. What kind of person do you think would enjoy this then? Because I think for, and I'm going to preface this by saying I've been watching a lot of 70s movies, right? And I think about where does this movie fit in with, like, I saw Sorcerer recently. I love Godfather, right? This movie, same year as All the President's Men. And we've done the Parallax View, another Pakula movie, in this before, you know, but does this movie even fit in with those? Like, I just don't even know. Other than John Cassavetes, like diehards, I don't know who would even want to watch this.
Anybody who's interested in acting, again, the relationship, the actor's relationship, Peter Falk, Cassavetes, so much of their interactions are in the spaces between the words that they say.
Mm,
So and in terms of screenplay, also
yeah.
somebody that wants to think about how to write authentic human interactions, because as shitty as all of these characters, as these men are, I don't think that there is one wrong note emotionally in this movie.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
That's
Like you
interesting.
never
Yeah.
get you never get this. You never watch it, and it's like, they'd never do that, or they'd never say that. This is a great job of portraying authentically a particular type of person. Anyway, yeah, that's it.
I say,
So
yeah, and if you to answer the question, what kind of person would like this, which I love, what kind of person would like this? Um, yeah, I think somebody who is enthusiastic about not only acting and watching good performances. I think that's definitely definitely attractive here, but also in the kind of long conversation of gangster and gangland movies and how they're portrayed. Because this definitely, I think, stands out. If you're interested in that type of movie, that's why I was saying it was almost like a Sopranos episode, because it seems like it's a vignette from this larger portfolio of that particular genre. And it's a really nice kind of perspective on just these people who are completely incompatible with society, and the only way they really kind of get by is by threatening people, pretty much.
Very much.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
they barely get by even doing that.
They suck at that.
I think they do. They're largely incompetent human beings. Yeah, I liked the movie. I like this film as a film with all of its flaws.
I find it deeply inspiring. It's extraordinary that somebody couldn't make this for $100,000 today or less. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I will never watch it again.
huzzah, huzzah!
Which, I can't disagree with that.
All
I
right,
might watch that one scene again. There's a couple of individual scenes that I might want to just check out to go back over. But just in terms of, because we had this conversation about it, now I want to go back and kind of reinforce my memory. But beyond that, I don't know if I'm gonna
Yeah,
pop this on again.
Yeah, no. I definitely need to check out the black women in the background at the diner.
Exactly.
they're like confused.
Talking about, yeah.
Over the counter?
Yeah. No, I'll watch The Fly again for the 38th time.
I know. I love how you're like, couldn't get through this.
it's-
Anyways, watch Scanners again.
It's slightly less grotesque.
All right. Very good. Break? Small break?
Do we need a break?
Yeah.
Sure thing.
Before, what else did you watch? Absolutely.
On.
All right. Had a bit of a longer break in between sessions this time, so we probably had a chance to watch a lot more. Molly, what did you watch? What else did you watch?
I did not watch more. I will tell you that I am back reading through the Murderbot Diaries. Martha Wells has a new one coming out in a couple of months. She just came back from a cancer diagnosis, and so definitely in my happy place with that. I did watch, for reasons I will never be able to explain to anyone, I watched Johnny Mnemonic.
Yeah, I saw somebody was on the Criterion account.
That was
my
me.
My girlfriend was like, "Were you watching that?" I said, "No."
That was me. And
did you watch it in black and white or in color?
I watched it in color because because it's so 80s, or was it 90s?
Yeah.
Wherever. It could have been coming out in the 90s, but it's so 80s. So Johnny's head explodes because of 320 meg of data. He can only hold 80 meg. 300. I had to pause and just I died, like, oh my God, you babies, you absolute babies. Yes, it was crazy. Can't say that it's a good, in terms of movies from that era. I still like A Tank Girl. I think still like ranks as one of the best flicks from that era in that whole, cyberpunk genre. Ice-T, young Ice-T is still an amazingly effective actor. He's like compelling on the screen. He has this capacity of locking you into the conversations that he's having with other characters. His capacity to make these little gestures that leads you to what the next moment of action is. I haven't seen old Ice-T act because I'm not a fan. But young Ice-T was great in that, and the computer graphics were just everybody was so earnest and the amount of effort that they put into this thing. So that was it. That was Murderbot Diaries and Johnny Mnemonic.
That was 1995.
No way, really?
Yeah, same year the Heat came out.
Really?
Same year I came out.
Yeah, it really is. So 1995, it's still the most 80s movie out there. It's crazy. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
What about you, Aaron?
That computer enthusiasm.
Yeah.
I watched a few things. A couple movies and a couple series actually. I rewatched 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Nice.
Have you? Yeah, you watched
Hell
the
yeah. Oh yeah.
Cloverfields? Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. It's a fun one. And I remember watching it the first time, and knowing about Cloverfield, and you're kind of expecting an alien to be showing up at some point, which it
What?
does. But I kind of like this one because there's two separate like mysteries going on. There's the
Mm-hmm.
mystery of whether or not they're being held captive and being lied to, and then there's the mystery of what the hell is actually going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great. They really kind of squish those two mysteries in parallel really well. The female character in it, the lead, I don't recall the actress's name. Um, there's only three principal actors in it, but she's great. It's a really good character. Um,
I
you know,
believe it is our Lord and Savior Mary Elizabeth Winstead,
okay,
Really?
who is amazing and
Yeah.
beautiful. Shout out you.
and yeah, and then the kind of doofus friend, and then it's what's his name is the
John
God
Goodman?
John Goodman. Yeah, John Goodman. Yeah, very effective John Goodman. Love it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was really fun. We watched Dungeons and Dragons with the family
Mm,
Yup.
because all of them hadn't seen it yet.
Preach.
Yeah,
Preach.
very effective
Church.
movie. They
Just great stuff.
it is the right amount of irreverent and audience conscious and fan conscious and also fun for really anyone to enjoy that movie because it's just so kind of goofball and the acting is so great and it's yeah, the perfect movie. Dungeons and Dragons, Brotherhood of Thieves. Everyone should enjoy that movie. Um, watch the third season of The Witcher, which we've been keeping track of. It's a cliffhanger at the end, which is a bit of a disappointment because it's mysterious all the way through, and then they just leave it with mystery. So, yeah, it's a streaming service show. So it was a 5 episode season, and maybe in the next 8 years they'll make another one. Depends on how well the company's doing, stock price. And I also started watching I'm a Virgo, which is the
oh,
Boots Riley.
oh, yes.
That one.
How is it?
Yeah. Have you
Good.
seen any of that?
No, no, I have just seen the trailer and the clips, and it looks fantastic. I put it
Yeah.
in. Go ahead, talk to us.
Oh, it kind of has the Miss Davis vibe,
Hmm.
where it's just this kind of absurdist sort of superhero story, but really good. It is enough close enough to reality to make it relevant, and also departs enough from reality to make you suspend your disbelief. So
Hmm.
fun, recommended.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and it looks brilliant. And
Mhm.
you used the word absurdist, and I know that we haven't had a chance to do the Mrs. Davis conversation yet, but I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying some of this uh, narrative structure where you take metaphors, you take cultural metaphors, and you act as if they are real. And that's what
Mhm.
Mrs. Davis does, and that's what it appears
Yeah.
that I'm a Virgo does as well too.
Not no, not as much as Mrs. Davis. It's
Hmm.
not part of the language, using all these different kind of pop culture points, but it deviates enough from your normal sense of reality of what's going on, that it is fun, but also it constantly is demonstrating to you that it is not the normal world that you're used to.
Cool, nice. Did you get a chance to start Severance?
No,
Ah,
I did
all right.
not.
That's okay. It's on deck. I know it's on deck. Any
It's
I'm,
very
I'm
good.
afraid. I'm afraid
Very
to
good.
log into your Apple. I don't want to bump you out,
shh.
get you in
That,
trouble. Oh
For
yeah,
any
sorry. I will
yeah,
cut that out in case they're listening. Your phone is near you.
they're always listening. They're always listening. Go ahead and do it. And like if something goes awry, I'll just text you, let you know.
I'll get up at 3 in the morning. Anyway, Carlos, what else did you watch?
oof, we got a lot. We got a lot going on. Let's
Uh-oh.
start with I watched so much of The Bear. I'm 2 episodes away from being done with season 2. Molly, I really, really think you would love how these unlikable characters grow in a season and a half, 2 seasons,
Cool.
and you get to this place of like Hell yeah. Love to see my brothers thriving. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Great show. A couple Michael Mann references in it. What you gonna do? It's set in Chicago. So they had to. I think they're contractually obligated. In terms of reading, I'm still reading, my whatever novel I have, but also in nonfiction, though, I'm reading a book called The Godfather Effect, which I think, Molly, you and I have talked a little bit about. It has some questionable quotes in it that I need to research. One being that I want to mention from Booker T. Washington, an African-American who visited Sicily, said something along the lines of, African Americans have it really, really bad, but nobody has it worse than these Sicilians. I was like, I'm going to have to investigate that one because, sir, what? Yeah, the book's a little, to use their term, via vecchia, but more to come on that. I watched Denis Villeneuve's Enemy. I really did not connect with it. I really did not like it. It's the Jake Gyllenhaal movie.
Oh, I know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
Have you seen it?
I have not, but there was one actually I've written down as possibly wanting to watch, but it's not worthwhile.
I love the idea that we have filmmakers with style and filmmakers with a complete perspective that they want to do and utilize. The story just did not work for me. I just, and this will come back again in some of my watched. House of Gucci.
Somebody who meets their double, or
it's a doppelganger movie.
Movie.
I will put it that way. Yeah, but it's sci-fi. It's Denis Villeneuve, right? Where it's, but you have to like his style. And honestly, I think right now I'm more into a less, I guess, gray music video style than I am for Denis Villeneuve. Dune 2 is coming out this year, so I guess we'll see what that turns out to be. But otherwise, I love his movies for the most part. So I also watched House of Gucci. Ever heard of it?
Yeah.
Y'all ever drank wine and painted by the numbers, like an actual paint by the numbers thing, and watched House of Gucci? Because it's an excellent evening.
Is it better than a Will Ferrell movie? How does it rank next to Talladega Nights?
Much below. Stop that. That's heresy. I found out the other. Does, and she's incredible. But it has.
I gotta say,
but it has way too many people where I'm like, that is not an Italian. I don't care how northern of an Italian you're trying to make this person. Jeremy Irons is not an Italian man. Look at that person. Come on. And Adam Driver is the worst one for me. I'm like, okay, so he has a big nose. Look at this man's shoulders. He's not Italian. Stop trying to feed me that. That is so crap. Look at Adam Driver. Oh my God. Anybody who was fan casted as Reed Richards cannot play Italian. I'm saying it right now. Just no, thank you. Moving on. I saw Sorcerer finally.
Ooh.
A William Friedkin movie. And the filmmaking in it is pretty incredible. It's kind of forgotten. It was known at the time as like a big, what's he doing bomb? But now it's kind of been reclaimed as a 70s auteur masterpiece. Molly, I know you love those. But I will say just something from that movie, and from this movie too, but from that movie especially, because they did big action set things. Back then, it's truly crazy how more people did not die on set. Because you look at some of the explosions in that movie, and they look legitimately dangerous. Like, oh, that guy was like right next to it. There is no way he went into this shot knowing that might kill that guy, but what you gonna do, So it's like, what? It's extraordinary. It's actually a really cool watch. New movie, No Hard Feelings, Jennifer Lawrence movie.
How'd that hit you?
I liked it. I like movies like that. We were just talking about Talladega Nights. I'm like, oh, cool. She's dating the kid to get a Buick Regal. That's all I need to know. That's awesome. Cool. Good to know. Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, which I'm not going to say in Italian because I will butcher 2 words in there. It's incredible. I think you guys know me. I like pessimist about, or pessimism about fascism and the government in general movies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing. It slots right in there. I only did not rank it 5 stars on Letterboxd because the only thing I drag against is I do not like the Ennio Morricone score. That guy did so much work that you had to throw some blunders in there. This one has like kazoo in it. I'm
Yes.
like, what is that in this movie?
Yes, I've been waiting for the renaissance of the kazoo.
Yeah, but this was 1972 or whatever, so the Renaissance is gone. It's gone.
It's a slow incline to Renaissance for the kazoo. We'll get to the peak in about 2054.
Was it one kazoo or was it a chorus of kazoo?
Yeah, that's the question.
It's like one kazoo, and it's one of those things you like hit where it's like, and you're like, why is that in this movie? Like the guy just got done like. There's this amazing scene where it just sits. I'm not going to go too into it, but it's super serious subject matter and super dumb music. And
okay, so I know you said kazoo, but is it kazoo or is it jaw harp?
Yeah, I think it's all of it. It's just like an orchestra of the dumbest instruments where they're like, you know, it'd be cool.
The slide whistle.
Yeah. I think there's a slide whistle in it. That is so
let's
dumb.
Throw in
Bob Dylan,
piccolo, but let's just use the second half of the piccolo. Let's not even use the mouthpiece.
It's like Carl Stalling did it.
It's this close to being a perfect movie. It breaks my heart. I watched Fire of Love.
Is it
Stop.
The end credits?
I watched a documentary, Fire of Love, which I believe we talked about in this. That's how long this movie club's been going. Mm-hmm. I saw that movie when it came out. I love that documentary. It's just incredible, the footage they got. Highly recommend it. And then I watched another documentary about real things. This is Spinal Tap.
Yay!
Which is very real. I found out I owned it. I was just looking at my DVDs and I was like, oh yeah, let's throw it on. And I forgot that they did the commentary in character. So I'm going to check that out. I'm gonna watch that soon.
That's right.
Well, I mean, the DVD screen comes up and the first thing you hear, because it's all black, is them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, this is nice. This is like a black. It's AD black. Right. And I don't know. Part of me being a guitar player, I think I connect too much with it. And somebody who was like addicted to bad rock documentaries growing up, right? Where it's like follow Iron Maiden on a tour, but they're all like 70. And I'm like, I love this. This is the best. You know, like, so I liked it a lot. Best new movie of the year that I've watched. It's right up there with Spider-Verse, which I really, really loved. The new one. This movie called Past Lives by Celine Song.
Right.
Okay.
Molly, I think it hits everything you don't like about the Before trilogy. I think it does so much better.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Girlfriend cried during it. That means it's 2 thumbs up. Criterion sale is upon us, and I try and buy one thing that I've already seen and I love. One thing that looks like it, I'm gonna love it, but it's blind. I've never seen it. And then one movie by a person of color or a female director. My blind buy this sale was Targets by Peter Bogdanovich, which basically he considers his first movie. So good. Amazing. I'm not going to say anything about it because it might come up as a pick in this club.
Cool.
I watched Lost Highway.
Oh,
yeah. That's
my last David Lynch. No, that I needed to see. I love David Lynch. Yeah.
I thought half
of
that movie was good, like the first half.
So good.
Yeah.
The first third, right? Where
the third,
then something happens.
Yeah, and then it changes, and then it just, I don't even know what happens after that. It's just,
amazing. I'm with you completely. But Rammstein's Rammstein is in the movie. And any movie that does that, let's go. The soundtrack is so good. Where he's like, let's just cook.
Oh, it's got who else is in that?
Trisha Arquette, who is in Severance. I guess. Great to see her in that. And then a whole slew of Jack Nance. That's the only guy I also know because he's in
all of them. Yeah.
Robert Blake is in there.
Robert Blake.
Yep.
Yeah. They do this creepy thing in that movie that I love. The guy goes to a party and he runs into Robert Blake's character, and Robert Blake says, I'm at your house and then call your house. So he calls his house and Robert Blake is on the phone and standing in front of him. And then they laugh at the same time and you get this echoey laugh, like some sort of haunted church or something. This go ha 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 ha, the both of them laughing, one on the phone and one right in front of them. It's perfect. Great setup of having like a creepy laugh, literal and not affected somehow to make an effect. It was great. Great. Yeah, the first 20, 30 minutes of that movie is excellent.
Perfect. It's
And then,
almost perfect. The
yeah,
shot with the hallway, do you know what I'm talking about?
yeah.
Where it's over his shoulder.
Hmm.
Oh my God. Molly, truly hand over eyes material for you.
And then, yeah, and then
Safety
shut it off.
fingers. Put up the
Watch
safety
the movie.
Thank
fingers.
you. Aaron, what were you saying?
Yeah. Oh, Marilyn Manson's in that too.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's a passing part. It's not like he's like acting.
No. But still, it's as a kind of a cameo showcase of a pop
Yeah.
singer, basically.
Yeah. But from just a pure moments sort of perspective, I don't think the entire movie worked for me. Aaron, I echo basically your sentiment. But the cabin exploding in reverse, the shot of people in his house with the lights moving around, right? Where you're like, what's happening? These images are just incredible.
Yeah.
He's from another world, but we already knew that. So that's it. Finally, that's the end of the list.
Okay.
You've been busy.
Yes.
All right. So, Molly, you already mentioned your pick for next week.
Yes.
What is it? What is it again? Let me write it down.
In a Lonely Place, Humphrey Bogart,
So I don't watch
1950.
in a silent place.
In a Quiet Place. Yes.
Nobody knows the name of the movie.
See, I missed
Yes. Yeah, In a Lonely Place, 1950s Humphrey Bogart. It is
Nicholas Ray directed, by the way.
cool.
We've done a Nicholas Ray movie in this movie club. If anybody can answer that trivia question,
Not me. Not me.
Johnny Guitar. I believe.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, cool. So,
Really?
yeah, and this is, 1950 is a little late for the noir films, and sometimes this is a movie that filmmakers love. And I was thinking about trying to touch back to maybe some of, as you guys know, like part of my love of movies stems from my study of like mythologies, world mythologies, and movies are the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. They're a unique way of storytelling as well too. So I was thinking about like just hitting some of the American filmic tropes, right? I think Carlos, you said that you've never seen like a Western, so I think at some point we should probably throw one of those in.
Not one of the modern ironic ones, right? Like No Country for Old Men.
Right, like like John Ford. Like I don't think we've ever watched a John Ford and kind of done anything with those. Anyway, so this late in Bogart's career, and he was actually this is his production company. So
wow,
this movie was important to him in a lot of ways. It's a really it goes places that you don't expect it to go. And there's vulnerability in some of the characters that took me by surprise. It definitely is a movie that is still, I think I watched it 2 months ago at this point, but it is still bouncing around in the back of my head. So,
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I watched it around the same time per your recommendation. It's a good movie. I'm excited to visit it with you guys.
Yeah.
Oh, I've never watched it, so this is going to be perfect.
Cool.
So the big gimmick in it is that there's aliens, right? But they have like really good hearing, right? So like everybody's really quiet.
Shut up.
Are they Nazi aliens?
They used to be, but they were part of Operation Paperclip. Yeah. So they're mostly American now. They're mostly Americanized. Yeah. They all have American names and stuff.
Okay, but they lost their thumbs.
Like Ralph.
Sad.
Ralph.
Yeah.
All right. Is that our show for the week? Is that it?
It is, yeah.
I think it is.